It's now my pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker and our moderator. First, our moderator, a fellow club member and chairman and CEO of CDW, Thomas E. Richards. Tom joined CDW in 2009 as president and chief operating officer, and with 33 years of experience in the technology industry. He became CEO in 2011 and was named chairman in January of 2013. Prior to joining CDW, Tom also served in executive roles at Quest Communications, Clear Communications Corporation, and Ameritech Corporation. Tom earned his BA in economics from the University of Pittsburgh, where he currently serves on their board of trustees, and his MS in management from MIT. Tom also serves on the boards for Junior Achievement of Chicago and Rush University Medical Center. So welcome, Tom. Thanks again. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker for this afternoon, John T. Chambers. John is the chairman and CEO of Cisco Systems. Cisco is the worldwide leader in networking that transforms how people connect, communicate, and collaborate. And I think we're going to hear quite a bit about that today. John has built his career on seeing around the corner, identifying market transitions, and making big bets on what's next. It has helped him grow the company from revenues of 70 million in 1990 to 47 billion, 47 billion during the 2014 fiscal year. And his insights into the Internet of Everything, which he's going to share with us today, I think could be one of his most far-reaching areas yet. So, during his tenure as CEO, Cisco has been named to Fortune's America's Most Admired Company list since 1999, ranking #1 in the network communications category 8 times, Business Week's Top 50 Performers list 6 times, Forbes' Leading Companies in the World, and is one of the top 10 places to work in, listen to this, the United States, China, Germany, France, India, UK, Australia, Singapore, and several other countries. I'm sure I've missed a few. So John, with his philanthropic leadership, has led Cisco's global efforts to improve access to healthcare and education, and has twice earned the U.S. State Department's top Corporate Social Responsibility Award, as well as the first Clinton Global Citizen Award and the Woodrow Wilson Award for Corporate Citizenship, and he also received the Excellence in Corporate Philanthropy Award, which is an award that's given by CEOs to their CEO peers. He has served 2 American presidents, most recently as vice chairman of the President George W. Bush National Infrastructure Advisory Council, where he provided industry expertise and leadership to help protect the United States' critical infrastructure. And he's also served on President Bush's Transition Team and Education Committee. And he was on President Bill Clinton's Trade Policy Committee. So now, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to John Chambers.
Donna, thank you very, very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back in Chicago. I lived here for several years out of Barrington and loved it entirely. I was also very thankful you got me here before the middle of winter. I still remember the winters are challenging. But today, when you talk about what's occurring in the world, I'm going to kind of take us on the edge a little bit. I'm going to talk about the transitions I see coming, and it's going to be all around how cities, countries, and companies have to dramatically transform themselves and become a digital organization. And I'll back that up with facts and figures. But a large part of becoming a digital organization is how you connect everything from your customers to your supply chains, to your products, to your own employees in a way that will drive productivity to $19 trillion of profits and cost savings in the next decade. That's 1 to 3% growth in every major economy in the world, assuming they move with a reasonable pace to achieve this. As you got from my initial comments on this, if you agree with everything I say, I will have failed miserably. So I want to challenge you. I want to make you a little bit uncomfortable. I want you to sweat a little bit on some of the issues I share. And you've heard the saying before, change is the new norm. But the changes are now not taking place twice as fast as they used to. They are now taking place exponentially. Just think of the last week as an example. Or think of 3 weeks ago when I was in Europe with the issues in France occurring, the issues in the UK in terms of the Scottish independence. Think about the issues in Germany with Merkel's 4.0 type of initiatives. And those are the new norms. We in the business community, but also in the government community, have to learn to be agile and move rapidly. But each one of us will not be a tech company, and technology will not enable our strategy. Each one of us will become a digital company specializing in retail, in manufacturing, citizen services, etc. And you can say, well, John, that's kind of far out. All the major companies are already starting to move. I was at Walmart last week with 500 of their top leaders. The new CEO has basically said, all right, we have to win at the intersection of the digital world and the virtual world. And if we don't, we will in essence go from the world's largest company to a non-player. And I could go all the way through to the GEs of the world, the American Expresses of the world, JP Morgan Chase, etc. But you're also seeing the same thing from countries. You begin to look at what Merkel's doing with her Industry 4.0 initiatives, realizing that she missed an initiative in terms of the evolution of the manufacturing industry, especially autos, as it really embraced technology, and now she's going to skip a generation in terms of how she moves forward. If I were here last year, I would have tried to make you uncomfortable with this chart. It's what we mathematically know until we rethink what does it mean. Only 24% of the Fortune 500 that existed a short time ago are there today. And 87% of the people in this room are going to have an economic downturn, and only 11% of you are going to recover. And only a third of you will exist in a meaningful way in 25 years. I was way too optimistic. What you're about to see as these changes take place between the virtual and physical world is a realization that 40% of the companies in this room will not exist in a meaningful way in 10 years. It is going to be tremendous disruption. It isn't just the fast beat, the slow. It's going to be, in my opinion, and I'll share with you the data, how you become a digital company that combines the best of a digital and physical world. And a large part of the success will also tie back to how the city of Chicago creates an environment that allows you to be successful or not, depending on the execution. As you think about what this means, I'm talking about the impact of the internet from its very inception to today, which all of us understand its effect it's had on your business, times 5 to 10-fold in 10 years. The speed of change will be exponentially about how we look at it occurring. And while I'll get excited about cool technology things such as security and clouds and collaboration, it really comes down to how it will transform every aspect of our business. And who are the most difficult people to get to change? Those individuals and those companies who've been most successful. Think about it in your own organization. When you make changes, do you go to the most successful group, or do you go to the group that really wants to change and be improved, and you have your thought leaders? So as we think about what this really means, it isn't about connecting things, because if all you do is connect things, you get so many data feeds, you have no idea what you do. We talked to a mining organization at our CIO conference last week. They receive 120,000 inputs from their equipment in a single mining site per second. It's about how do you take the information, how do you get the right information at the right point in time to the right device so the right person or right machine can make a decision. Sounds easy, but that is architecting your business around process change, around people, and around the data exchange. So as you think about this, connecting 14 billion devices going to 500 billion sounds nice, but it doesn't do anything unless you change the process behind it. So as you think how this is going to occur, look at these numbers. Just think of it, because as we just did the Internet of Everything Forum here in Chicago, we got up in front of the group and we started talking, Wim Elfrink, who's my right arm on this, we started talking about the data. So I got all the charts, I started to draw the picture of how fast did the number of sensors increase. Number of sensors being shipped in the market went from 4 billion to 24 billion in 2 years. And I thought, well, interesting, how fast did the machines go? So I started to draw the graph. It went from 2.6 billion to 4.2 billion. You know where I'm headed? How much did the media coverage change? It went from 4,000 to 45,000 in 2 years. This is at the very top of the technology hype chain. And by the way, it's the early innings on it. And so the point that I'm making is the speed of this change is like nothing we've ever seen before. We started on this 8 years ago, and it didn't move to almost 12 months ago. And then it's taken off like a rocket. You're now seeing cities, companies being the lighthouse or the key references on how fast this is going to occur. You see the business CEOs sense it. You don't make it as a CEO if you can't sense either an opportunity or a problem coming at you. And that sentiment has been changed in 12 months. You're seeing most of the government leaders understand how they're going to digitize their country or their city. Venture capital investment, if you really want to know the next cool thing in technology or business, follow the venture capital money. 10% of venture capital is going into the Internet of Things as you look going forward. The ability to think about the number of startups that will occur here and the software developers. So when you think about this pace, no matter how you measure, it's up and to the right. And all of us know as business and government leaders, when you see that many things occur at the same time, what does it mean? This will probably be the biggest transition technology's seen. But it isn't going to be technology. It's going to be the GE manufacturing plants or the Harley-Davidson manufacturing will completely change their business. There will be what you call exponential improvement, where you suddenly think so far out of box by a factor of 10x. This is how it occurs, and most of us that have been at the front end of a major curve want to think exponentially for a large part of what we do. But there will also be linear thinking. GE will tell you if all they have to do is increase by 1 mile the number that a locomotive is driven per day, and that results in $200 million in profits for the transportation company. Or reduce the cost by 1% for the airlines in terms of how you connect their engines and how do you manage the performance of fuel consumption by 1%, and it's $3 billion in profits for the airlines, which is more than they ever make. And you know where I'm headed. I could walk through this one example after the other all the way through. Retail, Walmart will be the first truly digital physical company. And if they don't, they will get left behind, not just by Amazon, but a whole new business model. And as you think about it, we in this room are normally a combination of physical and virtual, so we have to play the game faster than some of the new virtual players coming at us. Let me start with countries. On this concept, it's amazing. You never move unless you've got the very top leader's support, because otherwise you're pushing a rock up the hill. Israel is, in my opinion, the top technology country in the world with 7 million people. Yet they made a decision to become the first digital country end-to-end, largely as Cisco is their partner in each category. But as we talked about what they were trying to accomplish with the 3 major political parties, with Shimon Peres as the president of one party, with Netanyahu, the prime minister, that was the leader of the other, and Lapid, who is the chief of finance on the others, they were all agreed on what we were going to do. Number 1 thing, GDP growth. Number 2, jobs. Number 3, jobs that were inclusive of their population. The 40% of the population that is Arab that is not being included in the job growth. Number 4 is also the Orthodox Jewish population that's coming back into the workforce. Number 5 was thinking about how do you bring education virtually and physically, as well as healthcare, to every Israeli in every part of the country. Number 6, moving cities to the south for economic and defense reasons. Number 7 was in generating their new next generation of IT companies. And that's what they did in less than 2 years. Completely changed the game. Merkel with her Industry 4.0, she knows the U.S. has an advantage on energy. She knows we have a huge advantage on technology. So she's going to skip a generation. She's literally going to wear her whole country, and especially the business sector, and make her automotive sector, as an example, a technology company first that just happens to specialize in terms of how they do manufacturing. I could walk you through city after city. Barcelona, the top internet city in the world. It was just voted the top innovation city in all of Europe. Generated 47,000 new jobs. They're in Spain in the worst economic downturn imaginable. They run a surplus. They save $3.2 billion over the next 7 years in terms of the approach. And they have the best place for business to be found, the best place for people to go work. By the way, all Cisco architecture. And the reason I'm mentioning Cisco is not so much to say a plug for us, although if you want to buy more from us, you can. A little humor, my humor gets better over time. You get used to it. But more that if we didn't move to this, we would get left behind. And it's the ability to then articulate a business case with a scenario that's going on. Now, let me be positive but also critical of ourselves, because lots of people get in front of you and talk about how they're different. Each of us ought to be thinking today, whether you're in business or government, what are your sustainable differentiations you have? How much have you got that built into your culture and DNA? And do you have the courage to change? People were kind enough to ask John, how did we go from 70 million to 47 billion? And by the way, my competitors from even as recently as 15 to 20 years ago, none of them exist. And the same thing could happen to us. And from 10 to 15 years ago, Alcatel, Lucent, Nortel, I could go on, tremendously powerful companies are a shadow of what they used to be because they missed market transitions. So the first thing I watch for that's been successful for us is the market transitions. And when we miss them, I go acquire to get caught back up. Second thing is, different than the consumer industry or different than what Apple did, if we listen properly, you'll tell me what products to build, what you like, what you don't like. I listen to every critical account in the world every night, and you'll tell me even which companies to acquire. And the third is this seeing around corners, knowing how things are going to change, partially getting the technology trends right, but also getting our competitors right. My competitors of the future, I said 4.5 years ago, would not be an HP or an IBM or a Juniper or an Alcatel-Lucent. It would be bare metal and white label. In other words, standalone products, open software on top of it, architecturally, that cost much less than what companies traditionally did. And so we decided to tie our product leaderships together to focus on architectures with platforms, application, infrastructure, and services so we could focus on total cost of ownership and business relevance. And I believe what you'll see over the next 4 to 5 years play out, assuming we execute, is we'll get a squeeze play on the traditional players who are single products. Now, you could argue is that right or wrong, but what I'm sharing with you is focus on where your industry's going. Focus that your competitors of the future will probably not be your competitors of the past. Think of an American Express where Ken Chenault knows he has to bring innovation to his company because he understood the issues of PayPal and the Walmarts of the world and the Apples of the world going into his traditional business. And every one of us should understand that your traditional core business will have what tendency over time? Commoditization. So you have to move into market adjacencies or bring the adjacencies tightly tied back to your core business or you'll get left behind. You could imagine being in front of the Walmart leadership team and I said, how many of you think lowest price is your sustainable differentiation? Boom, the whole room went up. And I said, I'm going to really comment on some sacred cows now. What happens if you can't maintain the lower price? If your overhead structure through a physical implementation is going to be dramatically challenged much more than it is today in terms of virtual implementation, and you base your strategy around that, what happens? And to the Walmart team, and this shows you how good they are, they got it. They might not invite me back, but they got it. And I'm teasing a little bit on that. They will invite back because they are a company that constantly reinvents itself. And usually that requires changing CEOs. But the key for the leaders of each of us in this room is how do we as a CEO become our own activist? How do we reinvent ourselves constantly in catching these market transitions? How do we look where it goes? I don't compete against competitors. Chris and I have been friends for many years. I've focused purely on the market transitions. If I get the market transitions right as we go forward, that's how we break away. Each one of these transitions is $1 billion to $5 billion market for us. So I focus purely, what does the Internet of Everything mean? What does it really mean when technology moves to data centers to the clouds? What does it really mean when you think about applications that will run anywhere and it'll be completely transparent to you? So getting the transitions right are key. Now let me share the tough side. Last year was our most successful year ever in terms of new product introductions. It was 2 times to 3 times more effective than we've ever done. New high-end switches that come out every 7 years, new high-end routers. We became a serious player in security with 30% growth. We made a huge bet on the data center several years before. We became the #1 player in North America in terms of our servers and data center strategy. We started to really take off on collaboration. Architectures came to life. And I made the toughest decision I've ever made in my career. After record earnings, we realigned almost 8% of our organization. I hired every one of those people. I know every critical illness that goes in on our company for an employee, their spouse, or their children. We will move heaven and earth to help them. And yet we laid off 6,500 people and are going to hire back 6,500 people. Because the skill sets we needed were not the skill sets we had. And if we waited through no more attrition to go and address this, we would have completely missed our markets. Speed of change. Brutal. Musical chairs, not companies consolidating. Watch the high-tech industry. Top 6 IT players today, only 3 of us will be meaningful. Maximum 5 years, probably 3 years. By meaningful, the others are on the way out of business. Nothing teaches you that like being at the Wang Laboratories with the most brilliant man I've ever met, Dr. Wang, in my life. The ability to then say, and it isn't so important about what we're doing here, it's more the concepts you might want to think about. Both mistakes made, i.e. when we didn't move fast enough, or opportunities when we caught market transitions. So it's going to be about fast IT in each of your organizations, enabling your digitalization, your connectivity of Internet of Things. But way we will go after it will be tying 18 products that were number 1 and number 2 in together with platforms, with services, with applications that will cut your cost of ownership. We will then move into convergence of compute with storage with the network. And it isn't so important what that is. It's getting the next transition right. That's what allows us to be number 1 in the data center. Then we're going to move for applications with security, with scale, where it becomes an application economy, can run anywhere you want it to run. We will then move into the Internet of Everything that is encompassing all these market transitions. That required us to completely change our organization. 70% of my engineering team no longer reports to the person they did or the organization they did just 2 months ago. Sales and services had to come together in a very, very unique way. Then we moved into virtualization of the next generation called Intercloud. And we then transferred our company from being able to talk about business reactions, but mainly talking about routing and switching, to business outcomes. My conversation, when I now have conversations with business leaders, it's very rarely about routing and switching. It's about how to use architectures to bring the market to life. Now, I'm not saying this is Cisco. I'm saying think about how you view your innovation. What are the moves that you're going to make? What are your sustainable differentiation? For us, our competitors let us get ahead of the game. They let us become number 1 or number 2 in almost every product category. We learned that from GE. It's why you constantly benchmark. Minimum of 40% market share, which prevented me from going into areas when you have less than 20%, one product transition, you can fall completely out. And then we integrated the products together. Now, this is where my peers made a major mistake, perhaps a fatal one for most of them. These are my competitors, the top 5 in each category of all 18 product areas. And the commonality, other than other, is there's no peer who is set up other than 2 to 3 product areas. So if we execute right, I've got a huge sustainable competitive advantage. I've got a cost of ownership and a business differentiation. So as bare metal and white label with open software comes after us, we can execute a game plan that our peers cannot. And again, the key takeaway is think of what is your game plan in each of your industries or for your city. We do it through architectures, tying it together, and the end result has been a constant evolution of having to reinvent ourselves. I used to say every 5 to 7 years. It's now every 3 to 5. And who's the hardest person to reinvent? It's the CEO or the mayor or the country leader. And yet think about what has occurred. And you can say, John, this is just you crazy guys in Silicon Valley. You don't get it. Not going to happen here. It will happen in every industry. No competitor on that list from 15 years and beyond. That means it was a 98% elimination of our competitors. 10 to 15 years ago, 5 years ago, people that they were worried about most just 3 years ago, we got them all. Now, by the way, with our employees, same thing will happen to us if we don't change. And so this is what I wanted to share with you, how I think technology is suddenly going to be not embedded so deeply in your strategy. It will be every company in this room will become a digital organization that just happens to specialize in silver services or manufacturing or transportation. So if you agree with everything I just said, I failed miserably. If I made you a little bit uncomfortable, you're a little bit tight, you're sweating a little bit, I've done my job. So Tom, why don't you come up and we're going to move into questions. Thank you.
Okay, John, I think you made a really compelling argument for the speed and how our lives are going to change. You've done an incredible job at Cisco when I think about over the years of taking a big organization and enabling it to change at the speed needed to be in the marketplace. How do you do something like that at a company that size?
Well, I think part of it, we're a product, many people say, of our past successes. I think we're a product of our mistakes and lessons learned. Having watched IBM be the most powerful IT company in the world and then fall from grace, and as I said, 20 years to recover. Having watched Wang Laboratories, Dr. Ann Wang, invent magnetic core memory for the whole industry, go through 4 product transitions over 32 years, miss one, and we're out of business. You have that only the healthy, only the paranoid survive, healthy mentality is there. But also, each time we've seen this by watching for the transitions, you have to have the courage to move with the understanding if you don't, the downside is much worse than the risk you take on the others. And so we did move from a router company to getting into switching, which people thought when we first did it, our stock went down. And we paid an unreasonable amount, $92 million for a company with $10 million in revenue. By the way, that company now produced $13 billion, 67% gross margins. That's off the record.
If you have any more of those, I'd be glad to help you.
And the same thing, we were an enterprise company, we moved into service provider. We got knocked on our tail in 2001, and as we got up, everybody said, well, exit service provider, go back to just doing routers with a little bit of switching. We stayed the course and moved to architectures. And so it's the ability to reinvent yourself every 3 to 5 years, but it's as much a commitment to the concept of if you don't, your competitors will. And your competitors of the future are probably not the ones of the past. And it's that real balance of trying, and none of us are as good at it as we'd like to be, of self-awareness with the confidence to change. And that's what we do pretty well as a company. Yeah. It's deep in our DNA. It's you know, Podm is here, Wim is here. You hear that throughout our whole culture.
Did the culture have to change with the inflection changes, or has the culture been fairly consistent as you've changed with the inflections?
You know, parts of it have been consistent, part of it had to change. We were a company that was so proud of our technology leadership that when we first hit a bump early on in '93, I went down to my engineering team and I said, we're getting a lot of problems with our customers, our product's too difficult to use. And the engineering team said, well, we only want smart people using it, so that's what we want. And I knew my problem. And part of it is, as a CEO, you've got to be self-aware, but you've got to have people around you who will challenge you and tell you when it is time to change as well. And so we listened to our customers for that transition. Mistakes made, it will shock you. You think we move really fast? Almost every mistake I've made is when I've moved too slow or I've moved fast without process behind it.
So you mentioned the number of acquisitions that you've done. I think it's got something like 170 acquisitions.
174.
The value, 174, and 70 billion. So tell us a little bit, how do you think about that? When you're moving at that pace,
yes.
How do you think about potential targets and the process that you go through to kind of find somebody that helps?
Well, when we first did our very first acquisition, I looked, and across the high-tech industry, you're talking early 90s, there had not been any really long-term successful combination of companies. So it was, you do your invention yourself, you do incrementalism in terms of how you grow. So we knew the odds on success were low, so we had to say, we're not going to be smarter than anybody else, but what are we going to do differently? So we developed rules of the road, if you will, golden rules that we follow. We don't combine an acquisition that we're not able to hold the reason that we bought them. In other words, in my industry, I'm buying people and next generation products. When nations bought Bank of America, they were buying geography and customer set. And if that's the case, you've got to be able to retain the engineers, you've got to be able to retain the leadership, you've got to have a similar view of how the industry occurs. Geographic proximity is a huge balance. I have a huge view, as you do, that you've got to be customer focused. If my target isn't customer focused, if they didn't share the success of the company with their people, I don't touch them. So we developed the golden rules on that, if you will. And I'd rather take the number 3 target that matches the culture than the 1 or 2, because if I don't hold the people, I won't get the next generation product out. And then you've got to have the courage that's going to fail. And I will get beat up probably for the rest of my life about acquiring a company called Flip for $600 million. And we got outmaneuvered by Apple. Apple said, this is a great product on stage. And my team said, isn't that good? And I said, no, wait to see what comes. And Steve Jobs said, I'm going to give it to you for free. And we lost track. It wasn't the device, a really cool camcorder device. It was the ability to put the sharing of your videos and pictures into the web with FlipShare, and we should have brought it to every smartphone. Now, the point that I'm making is once we saw that, we closed the whole division. Just said, we missed our window, it has to come down. And I've gotten a fair amount of criticism on that. Now, guess what? Out of my top 20 acquisitions, out of the 174, what do you think fits?
I have no idea.
Not in the top 20.
Yeah.
But yet as a leader, you've got to realize they won't remember the $2 billion and the $3 billion acquisitions you did that year. They'll focus on the negative one. That's the world we live in. So you've got to have the courage to do that. You've got to tell your employees, your shareholders, and your customers, although your shareholders will forget it for a while, that you expect a breakage rate of at least 1 out of 3, and my industry average is 9 out of 10.
Yeah, you know, interesting when you're talking about seeing around the corner, those inflections. One of the things that I think Cisco has done a great job is transform in another way, is becoming much more of a software-driven company and having products that are software-driven. Talk a little bit about either that decision or where you are in that process.
And this is one that I think all of us understand as business leaders. It's like what we got taught in school. There is no single variable equations. And so anybody that thinks you can move from a hardware company to a software company doesn't understand what's about to happen in this market. Now remember, the majority of software companies do not make money. 84% of the companies going public today do not make money. So if you take a company that, let's say, has gross margins of 61, 62%, and by the way, nothing I say today should be inferred about how my quarter is going. I've got a couple weeks left in the quarter, and you shouldn't be optimistic because I'm in good spirits with friends, and if I'm a little bit concerned about the negatives, you shouldn't read that a different way either.
CDW, we can help you with that quarter, John.
Yes, you can.
About that.
But that's 3 years of law school. My parents would be very proud of me. So this doesn't refer to the current quarter in terms of where we're going at all. And the question was?
I don't know, but you're doing great. It was software to a driven company.
So where we're going is if we just took a hardware company and went to software, even though 85% of our engineers are already software operating systems in the hardware, we would fail. And so our view is that it will be software and hardware, and this is where history repeats itself. When you combine software and hardware together, there's something called silicon or ASICs. And so we're going to be probably the only major player in the communication industry that builds our own ASICs. Most of the other people will require on merchant ASICs, and we will use players like Intel as well for merchant ASICs. But by doing our own software, we can produce the products quicker in the ASICs at maybe as much as 30 to 50% better throughput at a 40% cost advantage and with less complexity, which makes the products more resilient. So you had to see this coming, so we combine hardware with software, with ASICs. And then when we miss something, we have the courage to do something very unique. And I'll describe that for just a second so you can get an idea, because you can imagine what this stress on the company was. We will do what we call a spin-in. We take several of our executives. We say we've got to move very rapidly here. We're going to pay you, if you're successful, more than we pay the president. Your engineers will make more than the other engineers in the company by a factor of 10-fold. We're going to spin this back in, and we're going to do it with 100, 200 people in 2 years as opposed to 4 to 5 years to be able to do it. And when you start those, you catch a lot of constructive feedback internally, which, by the way, is fair. And when they're successful, you all of a sudden, everybody gets what you're trying to do. So we're willing to rewrite kind of the textbooks for speed of innovation. And so when I missed an area called software-defined networking, we realized we'd missed. So we went out, we did a spin-in back into it. We embraced software with ASICs, with hardware, built common applications that run from the data center to the edge, and barring a huge surprise, we'll win that whole battle over software-defined networks as part of a single structure, as opposed to a software-only fabric, which is where everybody else is going. So it's what your sustainable differentiation is, willing to take risk, and willing, if you're wrong, to step up to it and readjust quickly. Being able to acquire, however, gives you a huge advantage. When you're wrong, you can go fix it at a quicker pace.
Well, you know, that the connective tissue then to the Internet of Things, because I would suggest, or maybe even argue, that you guys might have seen around the corner, maybe 2 or 3 corners before a lot of other people on the Internet of Things. Yes. The upside and the potential is exciting, but what about, are there downsides, like the issue of security and how that plays into the proliferation of devices and things that are collecting data? How do you think about that?
Yes. Well, the first one is we were too early in the Internet of Everything. And in hindsight, we made it too exciting too early. And even 2 years ago, I would have probably had to buy most of your executives at CDW drinks for them to listen to us on it. Today, most countries and most of the business leaders bring their whole board of directors to Cisco, their senior management team, to say, how do we do this? So being early is almost as bad as being late, and you've got to determine, is this the right move, in which you've got to have to stay the course, or did you miss, and is it not going to go the way you expect? This one, women I stayed with, and it's only been in the last year that it's really hit the exponential points. Like anything you do, it has weaknesses. So the concept of internet to everything is why the internet took off. There used to be 20 different languages that people use to talk across the internet. Apple Talk, SNA, DECnet, etc. It now came down to one thing called Internet Protocol IP, and everything when it goes to Internet Protocol means there's just going to be one protocol running this. Once there's only one protocol running this, and that includes all the electricity where there used to be 360 different protocols running it, if you can suddenly take down that protocol, you can turn off the lights of a country, you can cause your vehicles to stop where they are, you can cause your manufacturing line to stop, etc. So getting a security architecture across this in an environment where security, I know you had a prior leader that came in and talked about it, is very difficult, and you're always just one step ahead of the bad guys, whether the bad guys are hackers or employees who are disenchanted or organized crime or rogue nation states. So we've got to work on that security issue, and that's why we moved into security. I was sitting at a conference like this, and I was watching one of my counterparts get beat up about security. I said, boy, I'm glad that's him, not me. And then all of a sudden he said, that's Chambers' problem to fix. And what they were saying, Cisco, it has to be fixed from the network. So we're going to try to become the #1 security player. We understand what that means from consultancy, et cetera, but that's one of the areas. The second is, as you do this, it has huge promise, but if you don't deliver outcomes, then you can have a big disappointment behind it, especially in government. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to say, how do we in the industry come together in a common ecosystem to produce outcomes? Because none of us can do it by ourselves. At our conference that we just had, it was a common, if you were in manufacturing, you were probably with Rockwell or Snyder and Cisco and a couple of startups to make it work. Now that ecosystem to move fast is hard. So that's the second area. How do you really make it go hard within that? And the third, candidly, is how do you understand how quickly these changes will occur and discuss it in business terms that an individual industry understands, and then have lighthouses with it. But all of them have weaknesses. Every great transition we've ever made as a country or in technology has downsides.
You mentioned on the chart you had Chicago listed as one of the digital cities. Mm-hmm. How should we, beyond thinking about it individually, how should we as a region be thinking about the Internet things? Or should we be thinking about it as a region?
Well, I think you have, and let me give a compliment to your mayor. He sat on my right yesterday when I did an interview with him, and he said, John, this is the first time I've ever been to the right of you on any issue. And he was right. And but you had a mayor who got it. And we don't go into cities or states or countries where the leader does not get it. Merkel gets it in the UK. Cameron gets, I'm sorry, boy, that's Freudian slip. Yeah. Merkel gets it in Germany. Cameron gets it in the UK. Alain, he really understands it for France. And often when people have to make a transition, you've got to have the courage to make that, often at a tough spot. We're going to bet on France at a time that almost none of my other peers will. We'll see if we saw around corners or if we made a false turn. I think we see around the corner there. So back to the region. I think you've got to think about how do you take this and make it a huge competitive advantage. You are in many ways not just at the center of the nation, you have so many Fortune 500 accounts, and you've got your startup engine starting to go again. You've got a mayor who understands it and knows what you've got to do from an education system. So I think to really push the envelope in terms of how Chicago becomes the internet digital city of the world or of our country is the first step. Within the businesses, you've got to say, do you really believe that I'm close to being right on this? And you need to think of how you create an environment and an employee base that focuses on innovation and fast IT to achieve this. Then the third issue that you have to do is come together, which I think you all do remarkably well, and say, how do we make a decision that we're going to lead, and then take it to the rest of the state. I think very often you've got to have, quote, your lighthouse accounts so people can't say when nobody's done it. You point to the city. Nobody's done it. You point to the companies in this room that have done it and the examples on it. But I think it can determine the economic health, the inclusion of the majority of your citizens and residents in the future based on how you handle this transition or not. Your mayor gets it. He's got a team around him, both on economic development and candidly a very good CIO who I told him I was going to steal, and he said, not a chance, that gets it as well. And so I think you've got the ingredients to change. Now the key is you've been too successful. Being very candid. It's so easy not to move. You're the number one city in many ways. You're number one companies. Most of you probably feel that you won't get displaced in the next 10 years, but if I were doing the math, at least a third and probably as much as a half will. So it's how do you get those that have been successful willing to change on it? And even me talking about my hands sweat because I know I have to do the same thing. So I'm not up here trying to say we got the answers. If we don't transition as a company, we will get left behind.
Let me shift gears a little bit. You and I had I thought, a fascinating discussion about customer-driven companies. And you made a comment that I hope you don't mind me sharing, that you said in about 10 minutes after talking to a CEO of either a partner or competitor, you can tell whether it's a customer-driven company. Tell us a little bit about that assessment and what is it that tells you that a company is customer-driven?
So first, why customer-driven is so important. We had two billionaires who were 23 and 28 years old speak to our CIO conference last week, the head of Stripe and the head of Box. And both Aaron and Patrick said it the same way. They said basically you've got to have a company that there is no entitlement. You've got to think not linearly but exponentially, and you have to be customer driven. There are very few companies in the world that can do what Steve Jobs did at Apple that just he knew, and he did. He was that smart and that intuitive. But he's one in a billion. Most of us in business have to listen to our customers, in my opinion, to get the transitions right. So when you meet with the CEO, if it's a target of an acquisition, even if the cultures were similar and some of the other things matched up, if the CEO really didn't believe in being driven by the customers, we don't touch it. It doesn't mean they might not be successful, but we think it's very difficult to be fast followers. The second thing is you can tell in terms of what's important to them, and you can immediately see if there's an overlap in terms of the approach. Or having dinner just last night with a financial services organization that is a technology company as well, we hadn't even taken a sip of wine and he'd already talked about two customers. So you sense it. You can see where it is. Now, I'm not saying that's right, but it goes back for Cisco's three things we do well: customer-driven, market transitions, architectures. And so for us, we're fanatical on it.
Okay. You touched a little bit on some global situations. It's a tough week to ask you about what's going on globally, but what's your view around the world, opportunities, areas of concern?
Sure. So again, the same disclaimer, this is not in any way referring to our business, but I have just been around the world and have a pretty good feel for what I'm hearing from our joint customers and governments. The U.S. is probably stronger than people believe, and I could be wrong on that. And don't misunderstand my comment. We should be growing at 4 to 6% GDP growth, not struggling to get between 2 to 3, but that's a separate topic. Europe is better than people think. I think they've been through such a tough time, they're more critical than normal. But Northern Europe, the confidence is there, they know the changes, they're making the issues. The wild card clearly is Russia with the Ukraine, and will that cause the economic issue to worsen to where it slows them back down. The emerging markets are probably as bad as you hear. Obviously Russia, major challenges. China is a challenge in and of itself because of American technology there, but China is probably slowing a little bit. Brazil is definitely really slowing, and you hear that from any industry. It doesn't matter if you're in cars, technology, consumer goods, et cetera, on it. A real bright spot in India. If I were betting on a country right now, Modi has the imagination of his country. He owns the equivalent of both the House and Senate with his party, first time that's ever occurred. He is going to move his country with aggressiveness. He cut the number of, quote, cabinets almost in half, which means the bureaucracy is getting cut down in terms of the direction. So if I were betting on one country, which we are going to do, I'd bet heavy on India. And then I'd watch Pena at Mexico. I think he gets it, and his concept of modern and prosperous Mexico, he understands. It's a nice way of saying we're muddling by with maybe a tendency toward a very slight improvement. There's some wild cards that could really upset the whole cart, the dominoes, but I think that's more the norm for the future rather than this is an abnormal time we're living through. And I think the stock market swings are something we just have to live with. And my own view is that I think I'm more optimistic probably on the U.S., the stock market here, than some of my peers are.
Well, considering I think there's been a number of times where you've been the beacon, so to speak, on what you think is going to happen, and it's happened. So I think that's encouraging to hear. You mentioned a little bit about, I'm not quite sure what you exactly said was, we should be better than we are as far as the United States and GDP.
Yes.
What kind of things do you think as a country we're not doing that we should be doing?
Well, I think it's important to be candid as part of American business, and I think American business has to speak up and lead. I don't think we can just criticize. But we all understand government cannot be misexecuting anywhere. So it's dysfunctional. It's probably costing many companies around the world 2 or 3% off their growth because of our ineffectiveness with other countries and relationships. GDP should be growing at 4 to 6%. We all understand that mathematically, yet it's not. Our education system is broken, K through 12. We've got to get that fixed. Otherwise, it not only will slow down our economic growth, it will result in a have and have-nots that will change the whole political process and our future as a country in terms of its implementation. And we've got to have the courage to change and in the process address some of those sacred cows that we wouldn't have changed before, especially around the education system and preparing our young people and re-educating people for the future. So I believe that our issues are largely self-inflicted. I think we can address them if we have the courage to do so. And I think a role model might be what Modi is going to attempt to do in India. Their issues were largely self-inflicted. There's 76% internal GDP growth. And so it was government ineffectiveness or inaction or even corruption that caused the problems in India. And I think you're going to see this leader fix it. And I think we need to move aggressively and learn from others within this country. And part of it is also getting our parties back together. We've got to say what's right for the country after this election and say how do we make those decisions. Tax law, which we all know has been delayed for 8 years. And a CEO life expectancy is 4 to 5. So to expect CEOs not to make decisions of putting their jobs and their acquisitions where they have their cash, often outside this country. Those type of issues, the immigration issue we need to deal with, and I hope that we'll deal with it in the spring, and I think the odds are good that both political parties will be willing to do that. But I think we've got to tackle some of these tough issues.
So we're going to end on 2 easy ones, 2 layups.
Yeah, now anytime this comes, it's like when a person says, I don't understand poker, I really don't understand the game, you end up with my money at the end of the night.
No. These are layups, I'm telling you.
Okay.
So one of the questions as we were preparing, people said, so for a guy who lives and has spent his whole life in technology, what piece of technology today, other than your cell phone, could you not live without?
Now they didn't tell me ahead of time I couldn't say cell phone. Because
I did change that. I'm sorry.
For all of us, I don't mind at all. For all of us, the cell phone, the smartphone, is the #1 piece of technology. And understand that our kids view access to the internet through their smartphone as as basic a right as food and water and shelter. And they expect it for free. And remember, 2 out of 3 would rather have access to the internet than a car in college. How would have filled that one miserably? Yeah. And the point that I'm making is it's getting that transition right. But what I enjoy the most, other than the smartphone, is the video telepresence capability. If you watch, the promise of collaboration is never delivered at the level that we all thought it would as CEOs. And we instinctively know it's there. And even when we miss, and us and Microsoft are the 2 leaders, but both of us candidly are not delivering what you all want, you find the companies coming back to it. So even a GE or a P&G or a Walmart that were with us through this change still believe that has to occur. So it's video, and it's video at very low price capabilities, i.e. $2,000 for telepresence screens, and that are easy to use and CEO idiot-proof so we can set it up. And I have 4 of those in my home, and a 152-inch screen down in our media room, which can really be fun. And I have several of the other units throughout. So I think the one piece of technology that's going to be most exciting will be how you do collaboration that combines video with the collaborative technologies in our language, the WebEx squared and instant messaging. I think that's going to really change our lives. And it will bring you to where you can watch a sporting event, and we can watch the Cubs play my Giants as an example, and literally be almost like we're in the same room with the interchange that occurs. So the one piece of technology that I would not want to live without would be the video segment. And then the next one is this Internet of Things. It will change your life, it will change your health, it will change communications in very unique ways, but we're at the front end edge of that.
Okay, so the last question, and I'm going to bridge on the sports reference.
Okay.
So John and I, in addition to living in the same industry for a long time, share another interest, college basketball. So I'm going to put you on a spot. It's a make-believe basketball tournament. There's
Yes.
3 teams in it: Duke, West Virginia, and the University of Pittsburgh.
Okay, go ahead.
So Pitt gets a bye in the first round because it's my tournament. So
Yep.
Duke plays West Virginia.
Yes.
Who wins?
Well, this is where your mind and your heart go different ways, because Duke did play West Virginia about 7 years ago in the Final Four. And I sat on the Duke side in the first half and the West Virginia side in the second half. And the pain was so hard when Duke beat West Virginia. I knew emotionally I was still West Virginian on it. However, Duke beats West Virginia, and then Duke beats Pittsburgh.
How do I end with that? John Chambers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, John.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you so
That's
much,
great.
John, Tom. We really appreciate you being here today. And thank you all for attending, and this meeting is adjourned.